Hi everyone, this is the second session and we are trying to learn about agentic workflows in Langchain. In the first session we looked at how do we create custom tools in Langchain and what are tools basically and why do we need them. Basically trying to recap everything. Tools is basically a functionality that helps us increase the level of productivity of an LLM. So today we are trying to basically bind LLMs or empower LLMs with these tools. So we are going to switch between two windows. First window is this particular notebook that I have here. You can find the link to this notebook as a medium.com blog that I've written. I'll attach that in the description. And this particular notebook that we are going to use. I'm not using any pre-written codes. I'll type the codes here and we'll see how they work. My motive here is to teach you in detail and from the basics about tools and agentic workflows so that you can get going in your project as well. Building from the bottom right up to the top. Let's go. So first of all, as we are trying to learn about binding tools into LLMs, we need to start with a concept called as tool calling. What is tool calling? To understand tool calling, we need to look at this particular image. Trying to zoom in a little bit more. Right. Okay. So, a user provides a query, a simple query like what's the weather in Hawaii to a model, and this model has been binded with a tool. This is not a normal model. This is an LLM which has a tool binded in it. As you can read here, not all models are capable of tool calling. There are some special models that are fine-tuned for the functionality of tool calling. And OpenAI, Anthropic's Claude, all of these famous models actually have these functionalities in them. I'll be using OpenAI for this session, so no issues with that. So this model here is an LLM that has a tool binded in it. In this case, a tool that provides the weather condition in a particular location. When the user asks a query, what's the weather in Hawaii? Then instead of giving a generic LLM response that we expect, it provides an AI message that looks like this. It has a metadata called as tool calls, and in that tool calls, it has in an organized manner got the name of the tool. The name of the tool is getWeather, and the arguments that this particular tool is expecting. As we can see that this tool expects a single argument, location, which has been extracted by the LLM from this particular user query. So the LLM knows that the user wants to know about the weather in Hawaii. The tool that is binded with this LLM is a tool that gets the weather from a particular location, and what it does is it generates this particular tool call. Now, this particular tool call is not going to run the tool and get the final output for you directly. What a tool call does is it just generates a structured format response that can be then fed to a tool to get a response. Let's see the complete flow. This one's a better one that I created. We take the input to the LLM. The input is a user query, and this LLM is an LLM which has been binded with a tool. Now, this LLM generates a tool call response which we can call as the parsed output. As you can see here, the tool call response is nothing but a parsed output. This parsed output follows the argument schema of the tool which this LLM is trying to call. And then This output, the tool call, can be then fed to the tool, which is basically a kind of a function running in backend to generate an output. Here the output will be the weather in Hawaii. And in a proper workflow, what happens is that this output is again fed to the LLM, and then the LLM looks at the output and generates the final response. There can be two conditions here. One, the LLM just thinks that, okay, it has provided me the weather, say that it has provided a data like the temperature in Hawaii is 40 degrees centigrade. What the LLM will do, it will generate a final response, which will be a sentence, a natural language response, saying that the current temperature in Hawaii is 40 degrees centigrade, something like that. Or the LLM can then choose to call more tools if they are available, any relevant tools, based on the output that it has received. So it's kind of a feedback loop, as you can look here, that leads to the final response. So you can see I've mentioned the process that it follows and stuff like that. You can read, you can go through all of this. Okay. Now, without wasting any more time, we can shift straight to the notebook and look at how to bind these tools to the LLM. First of all, we know how to create tools. So let me create two very simple tools from Langchain core.tools import structured tool. All right, I told you that structured tool is basically my preferred version. I prefer it more than the tool decorator. Now I'm defining two simple functions that will be assigning as tools, and we need to have a doc string. I told you about the doc string, right? It is compulsory to have a doc string. Adds A and B. Just simple description here. Return A plus B. Then we can define the second one called as the multiply. A int, B int, and we are expecting to return an integer as well. We will add the doc string multiplies A and B, and then return A multiplied by B. Now these are the two functions that we have created. We need to assign them as tools. What we will do is creating tools out of these functions. Let's name the first tool as adder, okay, because it is adding two numbers, so adder seems fine. Adder is structure tool dot from function. You can have a look at the previous video in this series to get a know-how of this particular class. Func equals add here. All right, now we will just copy this, go here, and we will replace add by multiply, and we will call this tool multiplier. Makes sense, right? Multiplying two numbers, the multiplier. Now I will create this list that will basically have both of these tools in it. So I'll write a comment here, creating a list to store both these tools. All right, so here we have created two tools. One is the adder, second is the multiplier. Adder basically adds two numbers, multiplier multiplies two numbers. And it has a very simple argument schema, a dictionary containing two variables, both integers, right? Simple. Let's go forward, okay? Now, what we want to do is, I have to bind these particular tools to an LLM. Now, let me import an LLM and access it. I like working with OpenAI, and then LLM equals chat OpenAI, model name, I'm going with the cheap one, 3.5 turbo. You can go with anything else if you want. And now we are going to bind it using this simple method llm.bind tools, which will receive, you can see, input parameter tools. It is a list of tool definitions to bind to this chat model, and we have already created a tool list. I will just include it here. Cool. Now let me run this. So now what happens is that this LLM with tools is an LLM which is binded to these tools. Now what will happen is, when I invoke this with a user query, let's see what happens. LLM with tools dot invoke. Now I have three options. One, to ask it a question which is about adding two numbers. Then it will call on the adder function and generate a tool call. It won't generate the final response because we know that tool call is not the final response. Tool call is just the bridge. It's the past output. As you can see here, this is the output that we'll get, tool call. Second option is, we can ask it a question to multiply two numbers, on which this will basically generate a tool call for the multiplier tool. And the third option is, we will see to that later, okay? That is a suspense. What is the third option right now? Okay, so just go with the adder. You want to add two numbers, add 3 and 5, a simple one. Let's see what it says. So it has generated this AI message, which is a tool call that you can call a tool call. You can see the tool call section in here. Let's see what it says. ID function, you can see it has called upon the add function, which is exactly what we expected, and it has converted this particular natural language into this argument schema that we can basically feed to this tool here, and get a response. Now let's look at the second option that I talked about, multiply 3 and 5. Let's see what happens now. Same, we have the tool call section. It has decided to call upon the multiply tool now. Now this decision to call upon the adder tool or the multiplier tool, this decision is being carried out by the LLM. Now this is the case scenario when we call this LLM as an agent, because it is making a decision in real time on what to do, what not to do. Now what is the third case scenario? What if I ask it a generic question, the questions that we ask to a normal LLM usually, like, hi, how are you? What tool does it call now? Let's see. It's taking a little bit amount of time. You see, now it has generated a very good generic LLM response. I'm a computer program, so I don't have feelings, blah, 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 blah. And now you won't find any tool call section in this particular response. It means that now in the third case scenario, the LLM is smart enough to understand that I do not need to call any tool to process this user query. So by default, when we bind any tool to an LLM, it knows that I have these two tools in my disposal, but at the same time, it has all the powers, it retains all the powers of the generic LLM, and it knows, it decides when to call what, when to do what. Okay, so now let's move ahead. What I'm trying to show you now is, I will try to recreate this particular cycle here. and I will show you the power of this particular workflow, this feedback loop, okay, and how the empowered LLM or the LLM binded with tools can help you solve complex problems. Right now here we will be solving a simple problem that will give you an idea, because I don't want to provide any kind of coding difficulties in this particular course, because we want to understand the working of tools here. We are not learning Python out here, right? All right, so let's say we have a query which says, this is a user query which says multiply 2 and 5 and then add 15 to it. So this particular user query requires calling of two tools, as you can see. First a multiplier tool, and then it has to add 15 to it. So let's see how our binded LLM works with this. For this, what I am trying to do is, first I will feed this query to the LLM, get a response, then as you can see here, get an output, and then again feed it back to the LLM, and let's see what the LLM does. Okay, so for that, look at the approach I'm following here. From Langchain, core.messages, I think here, import human message. Okay, what I'm trying to do is, I am trying to create a messages list where I will basically try to create a conversation history that we can pass on to this binded LLM. You can find all the details in this particular article that I've created for you guys. Okay, you can see the links are also there. You can just learn from here as well, but I'm going to showcase it how to do it and what it tells us about the tools functionality. Okay, simple up till here. What is this type error? Cannot be parameterized because it did not have it. Oh, my bad. All right, human message. I should not be using square brackets here. Cool. Now basically we have a messages list which has this human message object which wraps upon this query. Now what I'm trying to do is, I'll create an AI message equals LLM with tools, the binded LLM dot invoke messages. Now I'm trying to invoke the LLM, the binded LLM, on this particular query. Okay, if you do not understand this particular part, human message, what is this human message, you can learn about it. This is just a kind of an object, and this is the way in which LLMs take input. Okay, you can learn about this from the Langchain website or anything. Okay, OpenAI website, whatever you feel like. Okay, let's see what happens. AI message, let's see the response. And a cool thing is, we know that if we return AI message, we are going to get an AI message object like here, but we are interested only in the tool call section. So you can just go and type the tool calls and you will get the tool call section of this response. You can see here, now the LLM is really smart and it has decided to call upon the multiply tool first and then the add tool. It has identified that we are trying to tell it to multiply 2 and 5 and then add 15 to it. Cool, very cool. Okay, now what I will do is, I will create a conversation history. And alright, I think before that what we can try to understand is, how can we call, this is the tool call, right? How can we input this tool call to our existing function to get an output? Alright, now let's see how to do that. So All right. You can see that this particular tool call section was a list. First part of this list is basically the argument schema for the multiplier tool, and the second one was for the add tool. So okay, cool. I can show you how to input this particular response to a particular existing tool, because this tool call is just the parsed output. You can consider it as a parsed output. That's it. So I'm gonna go and click on multiplier dot invoke, and I will go AI message dot tool calls 0. You see, we have got a response as 10 because we were asking it to multiply 2 and 5, and I have only executed the first one, 0, that is the first arguments of the list. So cool, that's how it works. So basically it is working in 3 steps, just like the flow chart I showed you. LLM passed output, and then it provided to the tool to generate an output and the output. Now I'm going to show you an interesting thing. We are going to create a conversation history and try to see the power of this feedback loop. All right. So I'm gonna go and write messages.append AI message. Whatever message we got from here, I want to append it. Now let's have a look at the messages. It has got 2 messages. First is the human message, obviously, the query, and second message is the tool calls, which has no content, but it has got the tool call section. You can see here multiply and then add. Okay, cool. Now I can go and I can write for T, or I can write tools in AI message dot tool calls selected tool equals adder comma multiplier, and then tools name. All right, and then tool message or tool content equals selected tool dot invoke tools, and then messages dot append tool message. All right, nothing overwhelming. What I'm trying to do is I am trying to append each of the tool call, because we know that there are 2 calls in here. One is for the multiply, second is for the add. We are trying to append both the tool calls to this particular list. All right, now let's run this. Now let's have a look at our messages list. Okay, first is the human message, second is the AI message, which has 2 tool calls, this part, multiply and then add, and these 2 are the basic tool calls. So we got a response 10 from the first tool call input to the tool, and we got a response 25 the second one. Now you can easily see what has happened here. We took this human message, provided it to the binded LLM, got these 2 tool calls. Using these 2 tool calls in tools in AI message.tool calls, we called the tool on both of these multiply and add arguments, and we got these responses 10 and 25. Very cool. Now we cannot give the response in this way to the user, right? The final response, I know that the final response is 25 indeed. 2 and 5 10, and then 15 add 25. But I want to give the user a more refined response. So what I do is I again go to LLM with tools. So I can just write here final response LLM with tools dot invoke. Now to provide the final response, it needs to have the context of what the user said and then what happened and then what happened. So I'll provide the entire conversation history to this and then I will click on enter. Now let's see what the final response is, or rather the content part of it. See, the result of multiplying 2 and 5 is 10 and adding 15 to it gives a final result of 25. So you can see that it solved our problem in a very systematic way. First, we gave the input to the LLM, it created tool calls, we used each one of those tool calls to generate an output, and then we again fed the output to the LLM to create the final response. Alright, so this is how we bind tools with LLMs and use the LLM as an agent. Now in the further sections of this particular playlist, we are going to step into the world of agentic workflows and the LangGraph framework that we can use to easily create complicated agentic workflows. But for that, we needed to have a basic understanding, a good understanding of what are tools, what are LLMs binded with tools, what kind of powers do they possess, and yup, let's get going. We'll see you soon. Okay, bye-bye.